right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's open forum. I hope everybody's excited about these forums. You guys are doing well. We're having some issues with other brokerages and some of our understanding with what's going on with the forums. I get a lot of you guys asking me, telling me the listing agent's asking for a compensation form. Which one do I send them? Again, I've told you guys this before. We don't know. That's why I tell you as a listing agent to have them ready and let the other side know and send them the form, because we don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know if the seller is paying directly or if the seller is paying to the buyer broker. We're going to talk a little bit about that with the listing agreement and stuff here in a minute. But the first thing I want to talk about is you guys have started noticing that there's a flood disclosure that is necessary. You've noticed that on your checklist. Can I get a head nod if anybody's noticed that there's a flood disclosure on your checklist now? Awesome. I feel like a preacher or something. I'm like, can I get an amen? All right. So you guys have noticed that. So that is necessary, absolutely necessary. So you guys know this if you've been doing business for a while, that you can't always get a seller's property disclosure. Some sellers will not fill them out. They do have to disclose, be very clear, because you may have sellers like this, and you may have sellers on the other side that will either sign no sellers, they refuse to do a seller's property disclosure, or they've never lived in the property, right? We've all seen that. And you guys have asked Michaela, and Michaela has asked me, what do we do about this? And we cannot legally make them do a seller's property disclosure. Some attorneys tell their sellers not to do. If they have an attorney, they might tell them not to do a seller's property disclosure, but because they're going to end up saying things. Attorneys do not believe in saying things that you're not sure about, putting in writing things that you're not sure about. And a lot of them aren't sure about this because they just don't understand stuff. They don't understand what they should tell and what they shouldn't tell. I think it's probably what an attorney is thinking there. I am not an attorney, and this is not legal advice. I'm just telling you that's what attorneys tell people. So, they still have the duty, and I need you to remember this: when you have a seller who will not do one, they still have the duty. Please make sure you're muted in the call.
A new commission on court reform. As she read the message, she thought about that.
All right, great. So, they will. You still have the duty, even if they will not sign a seller's property disclosure, to disclose any defects of material value. Okay, any material value. Anything that affects the material value of the home, any active, anything ongoing, you guys can ask me on a case-by-case basis when it comes up, but pretty much anything you need to disclose. That is, if there was the roof leaked before, but they got a new roof, you don't have to talk about how the roof leaked before. It doesn't matter. If something is obvious and visible, you don't have to say it. But if there is a stain on the ceiling and it's been fixed, you want to disclose that, obviously, that it's been fixed. If it hasn't been fixed, then you say it hasn't been fixed. So, I mean, you just have to disclose everything. But this flooding thing is a big deal now. So it has been, well, flooding's always been a big deal. But I'm going to share with you my screen. On the seller's property disclosure, there's a very clear place to put if there's been flooding. Right here. Okay. This is on whatever page this is on. The first page, bottom of the first page of the seller's property disclosure. You guys see this okay? B, past or present drainage or flooding problems affected the property. Any of the property located in a special flood hazard area. Located seaward of the coastal construction control line. Does your lender require flood insurance? All that stuff. And this is why lawyers, a lot of people don't know what their lender requires and doesn't require and all that stuff. This is why lawyers probably don't want people filling this out. But let's look at the other page, which is the flood disclosure. And this is what you do if you cannot get a seller's property disclosure. We absolutely will not close your file and pay you if we don't have this, the flood disclosure. This is required as of October 1st. So it's been a month and 20 days. At or before this, it needs to be done at or before the time the sales contract is executed is what it should be done. But this is the seller provides the buyer the following flood disclosure at or before the time of the sales contract is executed. So remember this when you're doing it. Property, and you might as well send these even if there is a property disclosure. Might as well send them, right? Just get them all. People don't care. They'd like to know. People are comfortable signing things that disclose stuff to them. Property address, whatever it is. Flood disclosure. Seller has or has not filed a claim with an insurance provider relating to flood damage on the property. Everybody knows, whether even if they don't live in the property, never lived it, it's an investment property, they know whether or not they've had a flood. Okay. So including but not limited to a claim with the National Flood Insurance Program. Everybody knows that they've done that. Seller has or has not received federal assistance for flood damage to the property, including but not limited to assistance from FEMA. They know whether or not they've gotten FEMA assistance. For the purpose of this disclosure, the term flooding means a general temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of the property caused by any of the following: the overflow of inland or tidal waters, the unusual and rapid accumulation of runoff or surface water, meaning rain, established water source such as a river, stream, or drainage ditch. Here's the rain from like a hurricane or something like that that was not storm surge. So these are all, and this is where runoff or surface made a river, stream, or drainage ditch overflow into the property. So any of those are flooding. Obviously, anytime you have water in your house, it's flooding, not from pipes, not from a pipe bursting, but not from a toilet overflowing, but from something outside that you got flood, that you had to file flood insurance for. Okay. So that is important. That is when Michaela won't pay you because your deal's not ready, or won't send your CVA because she doesn't have this form. She either has to have the property disclosure, seller's property disclosure, or this flood disclosure. Okay. Does everybody understand that? Please ask a question if you don't understand that. Is a flood or vacant land or citrus land properties? Only if they've, no, that'll be on the thing. No, this is for homes. Residential real property. It's for homes. I don't think it's on our checklist for the others. I'll check into that. I don't think so. I think it's just required for homes. I don't think you would file for flood damage if it's just property. Any other questions? Nothing. Okay, this is required. Just want you guys to know that. So that is going to be a thing going forward. The more stuff that happens, the more disclosures are done. I've explained this to you before. Every disclosure we have, like an HOA disclosure, it's all because somebody didn't tell somebody there was an HOA and that they would have payments and that they couldn't park their work truck out front and that they couldn't park their RV in the driveway. And that all happened. And so the Florida Realtors, the FAR and the bar jumped in and said, let's make a form for it. So everybody has to get one signed now because somebody didn't realize that they were buying in an HOA one time and nobody told them. So that's why we have an HOA form. This is for people buying stuff. I didn't know that they'd been flooded. I get flooded and I say, well, this is crazy that I got flooded. And they say, oh, well, the last guy got flooded too. Oh, okay. So now there's a disclosure for that. So you know what you're getting into. Or they had to get insurance and the insurance company came back and said, you got to get flood insurance. And they said, why? And they said, because we have lots of claims here, including this house, whatever it is, right? So disclose. And that's what it's for. And you have a question?
Yes, if the seller doesn't know if their house in a flood zone, where can we find for them? Where's the good place to find?
Property appraiser site. It'll say your flood zone. Anybody else? Where else do you guys find that? No, the one I showed you, the seller's property disclosure is sufficient. Victoria is sufficient because they're going to write underneath it. I'll go back to that form. They have to write underneath it. If the answers to any of these is yes, please explain. Right here where my cursor is. Answer any of these is yes, please explain. This is where they write that. Yeah, we had a FEMA claim in 2018, whatever it is. I missed it. Does flood form require the vacant land or citrus land property? There's a flood zone map, Patricia. Yes, there is. So you just need, it's hard to tell some places in between there, but you can tell from property appraisers on the card. Any other questions on that? All right. Thought I saw a hand up. If anybody else has a question, let me know. Okay. Tell me what you guys, any questions you guys have on, oh, I didn't do that. Any questions you guys have on getting paid? The buyer's brokerage agreement, we've I have people sending the wrong ones and asking me still which ones to use. On actually getting paid, the compensation agreements. Do you guys have questions on that? I'm going to go over the listing agreement one more time. I told you guys before that I did not see a reason why anybody would have the seller do it unless they wanted to negotiate. But I do have one reason, because it kind of came up. Again, this is the Wild West. There's lots of stuff still going on here. So far, sale listing agreement. All right. And one of the reasons the seller might do this. So one of our agents texted me this week and said, can a seller work their own open house? And what happens if they sell the property? They absolutely can work their own open house. They can do whatever they want. They can sell it to they can meet somebody at the coffee shop and agree to a sale there, but you still get paid. Do I get paid the whole thing? You do if they do it like they have traditionally. So I'm going to share this with you guys. So they inadvertently asked a great question. So here we go. Number 8 starts on line 106, third page of the listing agreement. Let me blow this up a little bit for you guys if I can. Okay. Here we go. A compensation. If they do this at, let's say they do 6% here, and then they go down to 10A and do 3% here, this is how we've always done it. Okay. That is traditionally how we've done it before this NAR settlement. Okay. Now let's say they do that the seller wants to pay. Seller asked a question. What if I, ask all these questions? What if I sell it? Well, they can put here 3%. That's what they're paying FRI. No matter what happens, that's what they're paying FRI, right? Meaning you. And then down here, B is where they put the other 3%. All right. If they sell it themselves, then they would only pay you 3%. Does that make sense? If they do the 6 up here and they sell it themselves, they get lucky and they find somebody at their gym or their coffee shop or whatever to buy the property, then they're still paying you 6%. All right, unless that person has a realtor. Yes, Bonnie.
Hi, Ryan. What are people filling out on the listing agreement when I call a listing agent to find out what the compensation is, and they say, well, it depends on the offer?
Okay, great question. That's when it's this one, and they can put something here. They can put see additional terms, and at the bottom they put that seller will offer either numbers or seller wishes to negotiate buyer brokerage with the buyer's broker. You can put seller wishes to negotiate with the buyer's broker based on the offer, or you can put seller will pay 3% for a full price offer, 2% for anything less.
Mm-hmm.
Seller will offer that. So don't put they'll pay that, but they'll offer that, because if I send a thing that says 3% and my buyer doesn't want to back off that because he owes me 3%, then it's negotiable.
Okay, gotcha.
It's negotiable if they put it up here too. I mean, if it's negotiable, if he does.
Yeah, well, that's what I was wondering. Like, what box are they checking to be able to say that there isn't a set?
I wouldn't do no compensation will be offered. I would do this one and then put see additional terms.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, you can do that. You can do whatever you want, right? Or you can put. No, you can't. You got to put a number in there. Yeah. So you can't. So put that or whatever. Just see additional terms.
Yep. Okay.
Or thanks. You can use your text box and write see additional terms. Whatever you want to do when you put it in the signature program.
Okay.
All right. But then in additional terms, you put whatever the case is. I mean, just, this is between us and the client. It is a legal document, obviously binding legal document, but it's between us and the client. But
right.
It is it's you just put in there that how they whatever the seller says they want to do.
Right. I was questioning that because they, when this all first came out, it was like everything had to be clear and transparent and there were no ranges. We couldn't put any ranges, but I guess that was maybe for the buyer broker agreement.
Correct. You cannot.
Okay. Yeah.
No, here you can. Listing agreement, yeah, you can put whatever. I mean,
Okay.
we always have, right? We've always put if
Yeah.
Bonnie Black sells this property, she will take 4% instead of 6%, right?
Right.
Or whatever.
Right.
People have
Okay.
always done. But do not do this. I've already seen you guys do this. Do not do 3 here and then 3 there because you think that's 6%. That is 3% and all of it's going to the buyer's broker. You make nothing. So
Okay.
unless you want to do it for free, do not do that. Does that make sense to everybody? Not, I'm not yelling at you, Bonnie, just everybody.
Yeah, no, yeah,
That's-
yeah, I got that part. I just was curious on the, when they didn't really tell me, just saying depends on the offer. So I wasn't sure what they were filling out on their listing agreement to be able to say that.
Just that additional terms. I
Okay.
mean, this is it's still the Wild West for now.
Yeah.
And we're having a lot of that. A lot of sellers now are like, oh, I'll decide
Mm-hmm,
later.
mm-hmm.
But it depends on how much they offer. Well, so when you guys have no mercy as the buyer's agent, ask for all 3 of your percent in the contract. If they
Mhm.
tell you they're not offering 3% or 2, even if they're telling you they're offering 2.5, ask for all 3. Not going to kill you if your buyer owes you all 3. Ask for all 3. You're
Right.
doing your buyer a service. That's not being greedy as an agent. That's doing your buyer a service because they owe you all 3. If that's what they put on the agreement.
Yeah.
On the
Thank
buyer agreement. All right, no problem. You're doing great, guys. But I don't want to see you guys working for free, putting 3 and 3. I've seen this already several times because you guys don't understand that. You only put 3 here or 2.5, whatever it is, if they're offering an additional 2.5 on B down here. Okay, on this one, get rid of that one. Okay, so you only put 3 up there if they're offering additional to the buyer's broker here. And again, there's no, other than the seller selling it themselves, there's no reason to do this unless the seller wants to negotiate like Bonnie was just describing. Okay. Otherwise, I mean, if the seller wants to give a variable commission based on the offer, then they need to do it there. All right, Natalie. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. My problem, I was working with buyers. We submitted an offer. EXP is on the listing side. EXP will not do anything with commissions, compensation. They don't get involved. They advise their sellers that we may ask for it. I was working with VA buyers who asked for the full 4% that they needed. So I can't take it out of their percentage because they've capped out and they got that 4% towards closing costs. So I did a seller to buyer's broker, and that's where the arbitration is all crossed through. And that's the issue, because when I submitted it for the seller to sign to pay me, EXP agent stepped in and said their broker doesn't allow anything that's crossed out. And
Okay. Well, the brokers are nonsense. They need to stick to their pyramid scheme and stop doing this because they mess you up. So they can lose a buyer on a deal like this because they can only, if unless the seller's willing to come out of pocket 7%, which they would be anyway, even if they'd done things the old way, right? You do know about the form where you hear that when we did the form where they can give it to you even if the lender won't let them, that they can pay you directly, they pay us directly, even if the lender won't let them. Did you see that?
yeah, that's the seller to buyer's broker, isn't it? Seller to buyer's broker.
There's a new one that says how much compensation, not compensation, but concession they can give.
Oh, yeah.
I'll try to find that for you. And it says if it exceeds the amount the lender will accept, then they pay us directly, not through
Right.
closing.
That's what I had to do.
Okay, so you guys, I think Carissa explained on there why we don't believe in arbitration. It invites frivolous nonsense because nobody has to pay your legal fees and you have to go defend yourself and do all that stuff. So, and there's usually not an amount worth arguing over that you can hire a lawyer for and make sense. If you guys know, if you've ever tried to chase down $2,000 and you go talk to a lawyer and they say, well, that'll be $1,500 for me to handle it for you. And that's fine if you're in a regular lawsuit, a regular court where you get paid, or the losing party pays your attorney. But that is not the case with arbitration. So that is part of why. I'll let Carissa, and she got it from her lawyer, explain better why. So I don't know what you're asking. Just have them get the form then. I mean, they should be providing the form anyway. They are the seller. We don't know who's paying commission, all that stuff. You knew the seller because they said nobody, but that they weren't offering it. So you knew the seller would have to pay it outside of that. They weren't doing it through the broker, but they should provide the form. You don't like the form, provide your own. But we're still doing this at 3%. And if not, download one off of, you can download one off of Form Simplicity then. That's fine. If they won't accept it, the ones on Form Simplicity or Transaction Desk are perfectly fine. Does that answer your question, Natalie? So our FRI ones have that arbitration crossed off. If somebody won't accept it, then you can use the ones off Transaction Desk. Those are to protect you. Like if you couldn't get paid on this, what if they said that 4% is all we're doing, and your client loves the property, wants the property, and they're offering the 4% now, and they're a VA and they can't pay you, or we can only afford to pay you $500 or whatever. That's why we have our form with the thing that says if they can't afford to pay me, I'm not showing them that house. If somebody's not offering and my client can afford it, then I'm not going to show them the house, right? They've opted out of that. The buyer opts out of it. Like, I don't want to see that because I can't pay it. All right, because theoretically, you can go after them for that 3% or whatever's on their buyer brokerage agreement. It's not pretty what's happening, but it is what's happening. Yeah, it's crazy. Juan.
Okay. Can you go up a little bit to 8.8? Can you hear?
Yes, sir.
So in a nutshell, this is the intention of the seller and the listing agent. But at any point in time, when offer starts coming, everything is negotiable, and this could be overpassed, for lack of a better word, with any other compensation agreement, right? This is just the original intention. Because
once they offer it here, they're offering it. They can't go back. If they do 6 and 3 here, they can't go back on that. They owe 6 and 3.
Okay, so the first one is set on stone.
Yeah.
And when we put the 8A, then could I assume that it's probably mostly going to be 10A?
The seller can go higher, but they can't go lower. So if the seller does here, they do 4, and down here, and don't act like you guys haven't done this, and down here they do 2, and I send you a contract as the buyer's agent, and my contract says I get paid 3%. The seller can agree to my contract. You still get 2. Yours is unchanged. You're still getting 4 minus 2, but I'm getting 3.
You're getting 2 from the seller and 1 from the buyer. Is that what you're saying?
No, because I'm going to negotiate it from your seller. Not from you personally. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. Not from FRI. I'm going to negotiate from the seller. I'm going to say, and so you present your offer, seller, they're trying to raise you to 5% total. 2 for me. I'm still taking 2%. I'm still the good guy, only taking 2%. The doormat who doesn't work for full price. That's still me. But the other side, they're not doormats. They're serious agents, and they want 3%. So we're going to have to give them an extra point. Right?
Got it.
Okay, good. They cannot go back on you. The seller can't say, well, we'll take that out of yours. And you're like, no, that's not a possibility. I don't work for
Got it. Yeah, either more or the whatever you put in 8A, and normally when it's 8A is 10A.
Correct. And by the way, whatever you want to work for is fine. I'm not picking on you guys. I was just being sarcastic about the working for less. If you want to work for 1% or 2%, whatever, go ahead. A lot of agents work for 3%, but they only get 2 because they pay their broker 30%. So that happens too. Tammy.
So Natalie was we're talking, the cross out thing is on our buyer broker agreement, correct?
It's on all of our
Between
agreements.
Us and the buyer. Is it on this thing?
No. This is the Form Simplicity one, or the transaction.
Yeah.
This is Transaction Desk that I'm on right now, as you can see from the transaction.
A dispute is that crossed off on the listing agreements, number 13?
On ours, yes.
Okay.
No, we don't have one. We don't have a listing agreement that says that. I don't think our listing agreement. I don't think we've done a listing agreement where we've changed it.
Okay, so it's only crossed off on our buyer broker agreement.
Buyer broker and the compensation forms.
Okay, so the EXP agent had a problem because she used our form.
Correct.
When
Well,
they-
EXP, yes.
They should be sending us their form, but it's not crossed off, but we're still allowed to sign that.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course. Yeah. You gotta do what you gotta do to get paid. Yeah. So
Okay.
I have had, maybe since we've been doing this, 8 or 10 of you guys call me and say they won't sign our form because of the arbitration thing. They shouldn't be anyway. I haven't had any of you guys on the seller side sending our form that they've complained about. It's always when it's the listing agent, you guys are the buyer agent, and saying, I had to do the form and they won't accept it. And I tell you every time, they should be doing the form. They're the ones offering the commission. This one's a little different because they're not offering any commission, so it's a little different. But you can just, in that case, you could just use one off of or direct, either one, Form Simplicity or Transaction Desk. The ones on here obviously are not crossed off, and they're fine to use. They've got our logos on them and stuff too. Not
I
on.
haven't,
If you guys
Go
know
ahead.
that when you do these forms, they all say Florida Realtors here, but when you actually print them up or save them, they say Florida Realty Investment. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
and also someone mentioned, which I didn't get this or it didn't sink in with all the stuff going on. If we have a listing and we show a buyer, do you still need a buyer broker agreement on if you're showing your own listing? Somebody said you did not have to.
You don't.
You don't.
No, it's your listing. No.
Okay.
Anybody can wander into your listing. Now, if they write an offer, you put it with the offer.
Okay.
We're going to want to see it when you write the offer. So if they write an offer, then you can put just a showing agreement's fine because you know the address and everything. And they're not going to want to sign a 3-month agreement with you just to put in an offer on this property in case they don't get it. They don't know you, whatever. Just do the showing agreement for that property with the offer. The only thing they're bound to is to work with you on that particular property.
Okay.
You guys know the difference between the showing agreement and all that stuff, right? You want me to go over that? Anybody need me to go over the showing agreement and the buyer brokerage agreement? Just, I'm not going to go over it line by line, but just to show you the difference. Okay.
Sure.
Carmen, do you have a question or are you raising your hand to say yes, you do? Okay. Well, I think you guys know what the showing agreement looks like. I mean, what the buyer brokerage agreement looks like. Buyer brokerage agreement has time on it. So buyer brokerage agreement is time. It is not properties. It is time. So it'll say November 20th, 2024 through February 20th, 2025. Okay. So, or February 19th would be a 3-month deal, right? So this is the showing agreement is for this. So in the case that Tammy said, let's say I'm working an open house and somebody wanders in and wants to write on my by the way, an open house, even if you're working it for someone else, they do not have to sign an agreement to, let's say Tammy has a listing and I work her open house. They do not have to sign a thing with me. I'm Florida Realty Investments. It's Florida Realty Investments listing. So I do not have to have them sign a document every time they walk in. I'm an agent. It is our listing. So I am Tammy in that case. Okay. So someone comes in and wants to write on Tammy's listing, and let's say Tammy's working the open house on her listing and they want to buy it, and it's 801 Johnson Street. All right. And I do the whole address there, but that is what I'm going to, when we prepare this offer, they're going to sign this with the offer. I'm just going to put it in the signature package with the offer. Okay. That's it. They're paying me, we already know if they're only offering 2.5% or whatever, then we'll just do 2.5% here. Okay. Which is purchase or exchange compensation. We'll do 2.5 here because I know what the seller's offering. It's my listing. Okay. I do not need a compensation form with this, obviously, because it's all mine. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So I'm just going to give this to them with the contract as like it's an addendum. Okay. And this is my showing agreement. And it's just for this property. Obviously, they're not going to object to it. I show them the property. If I do it, I get paid. They know that. All right. Fantastic. Any other questions on that? I want to tell you, so this is for properties. Now, if you send someone auto emails, anybody have someone on auto emails? Anybody have their buyers on auto emails? You do, right? Awesome. if you have them on that and they call you and say, oh my gosh, Jenny, it is time for me to see these properties. I want this one, this one, this one, and this one. And so I am going to write all property 2, property 3, and property 4. Oops, 4 right here. Okay. I'm going to write properties 1, 2, 3, and 4 and send that to them. If they will not sign a buyer brokerage agreement, obviously I want them on a buyer brokerage agreement, but if they won't, then I'm going to send them this. Did I need one signed before I started sending them auto emails? No, I did not. Only when we're going to show them houses. All right. So somebody says, oh yeah, I want you to run a search. You meet them at a restaurant and they say, oh, I want you to run a search for me on this and this and this. Or they say, I'm looking for this in this area. And you say, oh, I can put you on a search. They do not have to sign something to get on that search. They only have to sign before you go physically show them properties. Okay. Or you can meet them in the driveway. And if they won't sign a BBA, then you have them sign the showing agreement for at least the properties that you're going to show them. How can they object to that? They can't, right? So there you go. Any other questions on that? So buyer brokerage agreement is time, and it's any property they buy from anybody, anywhere. And if they sign one with Brian on Monday, and then I ask them on Thursday, have you seen any other property? Yeah, I was working with Brian, but did you sign anything with him? If they say no, and I say, okay, good, here's this. They owe both Brian and me. They do not get out of Brian's deal just because they signed mine. If they buy something in the meantime, yeah, Brian, you don't have to respond unless you want to that. But if they don't, I'll get you your money. If they buy something from me or from anybody else, I don't care if they sign another one the next Tuesday with Tammy. They have to pay all 3 of us now. Okay, so these are real documents. They are real adults signing real documents, and they owe real money. They will owe all 3 of us 3% of whatever they buy. Okay. Just being clear with that, and they are completely enforceable. This is a legal document. It's just as legal as a listing agreement. This is legal as a purchase and sale agreement, and as is, or a CRISP, the standard. Christina.
Hey, so I feel like we maybe talked about this many months ago, and I don't remember the answer. So who is first position in a case like that? You know, let's say somebody walks into my open house and goes, no, I don't have a buyer broker agreement. I end up writing an offer for them. You know, who is first position if you know, some dum-dum has signed multiple BBAs?
There is no first position. They owe everybody. But the first one to get paid is probably the one that gets it on the, it depends on if someone knows before it closes. If it closes and then they find out, which is usually the case, then obviously you've got, let's say it was Brian's person that signed with him on Monday, then they signed with you on Thursday, and you close the deal and Brian finds out after closing. Then obviously you got paid, and good luck to Brian. He's got to sue him.
Right.
So if he's not gonna get your money, he's got to sue them. But if he finds out, he calls them the next week because he's a good agent. He's following up with them, and they say, "Oh, I already bought something." And he's gonna say, "Oh, well, you owe me a commission." And they're gonna say, "Well, like you didn't help us. Christina helped us." And he's gonna say, "Well, you owe me anyway." And they're gonna say, "Uh-oh." So, and they may just back out of buying for 90 days. You know, you never know. So, or go work, or back out of your contract and go work with Brian again, or whatever. But then they owe you. So, either way, they've messed up. But they lied to you. This is what the problem is. Or they signed a paper and they didn't understand it. But you're going to ask them, did you sign anything with Brian? Which nowadays, if Brian showed them property, they signed something with them. Say, show me what you signed with Brian. Because if it was just a showing agreement, you just can't sell them those particular properties. If it's a buyer brokerage agreement, then you can't sell them anything for 90 days or however long he had it for.
Right. I was just curious if it's something where they find out ahead of time, maybe it's, a week before closing and all of that stuff. And then I didn't know if it's
unless
would
you
file.
coerce them into signing something and say, oh, don't worry about this buyer brokerage agreement you signed with Brian. It's just sign mine. Unless you coerce them into something like that, then you're going to get paid.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right.
I came in 15 minutes late. I had a couple general, real dumb questions, but like you said, it's just a lot of stuff floating around my brain. So I don't know if you want me to.
Well, no, go ahead. Nobody's asked any dumb ones yet. So go ahead.
Here I am to save the day.
Okay. Thank you. We're waiting on you.
Yeah. Okay. So now that we have the agreement form, you know, I had an interesting one where I'm actually under contract. It's a piece of land, you know, pretty straightforward, but they, you know, they were offering something. I had a 3% with my buyer. Now she's going to pay the difference because they're only offering me like 2.5. But, you know, we negotiate, like I put that in the offer, you know, the 3%, and they go, oh, we accepted your offer. And then they sent it back. The compensation form had the 2.5%. I'm like, well, that's technically, I think, kind of a counter. But then, you know, I put it on the compensation form. I did not write my commission into the agreement. Am I meant to be also writing it into the agreement as well? You know, because I submitted the, you know, the form, I forget the name of the writer that says, hey, you know, contingent upon agreement for, you know, compensation to the buyer's agent within 3 days.
Mhm.
I didn't write it into the body of the agreement, you know, that they were to offer me compensation. I just submitted it with that rider. Am I to write it into the body of the agreement as well? Does it matter? What's your opinion on a best practice
So
for that?
you guys have agreed on 2.5 for this deal. So that's the 3% thing is dead, right? They did counter. It is a counter.
They
If
did counter. I explained it to my buyer. She's okay with it. She's paying me the difference. And then they did ultimately agree on the 2.5%. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. No, you followed the best practices and they sent you the form within 3 days, so you're fine. No, that was best practice. You could have raised a stink about them countering because you change one term on the contract, it's a counter. I don't care if you change
Yeah.
the date by 1 day or you do anything.
Right.
Counter.
But
So-
but should I be writing the 3% into the as is or the land contract as well as
What did
submitting
you
that
do
rider?
originally? You did it on the as is originally, right? You put 3% on there, right?
No. But previously, remember I didn't put my commission. Yeah, because we really couldn't, right? So I didn't put the commission
Oh, this is an
previously.
old deal. Okay, this is an old contract. Okay.
No, it's not. It's a new contract, but I submitted the contract. I didn't make any mention of my commission, my compensation on the contract itself, and then I submitted that rider that says it's contingent upon that.
Okay,
But I was
if you
just
had
asking-
a contentious buyer who was not going to pay you, and they were only offering, let's say, a bigger difference, like 1.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
Then you want to write it on the contract
Okay.
in the additional terms. In the additional terms.
Okay, so if you feel like if the buyer is like squirrely or they really don't have the money, it's a good idea to just, you know, seller to compensate, seller or seller's broker to compensate buyer
Yeah,
broker.
I mean, it's not even that there's not even that they're squirrely or broke. It's that they owe you that money. So
Correct.
you're doing them
Correct.
a favor by going after it. I want you guys
So
to realize you're not. Some of you guys have this mindset of, and I'm not talking about you, Christina, because you're pretty
like,
vicious.
wait.
I'm not picking on you because you're pretty vicious. You're the one who puts $4,000 or
Oh.
like that, or not 4,000, 4% and $7,000 or whatever. I love what you do, but a lot of you have this mindset that I don't feel good about going after my money on their contract because you've been trained that for years. And MLS used to tell you were bad, unethical if you tried it. You're not. They owe you the minute they sign this thing for 3% or 2.5%, whatever you're working with them on the BBA. They owe you that money if they buy something, even if they don't buy it from you. They owe you that money. You going after what they owe you on the contract is doing them a favor. It's the same thing as going after money for a new roof or for extra down payment assistance or whatever they need. That's what you're doing. They owe you. Your time is valuable. Your work is valuable. Your expertise is valuable. I want to remind you guys of the military tanker, and it was not something was wrong with the engine, right? And they had a guy come out and to fix it, and he looked at it and for about 5 minutes, and then he took a sledgehammer out and banged into the side of the engine, and it started running perfectly. And he gave the military a bill for $20,000, and they said $20,000. It took you like 10 minutes. He said, it's not the 10 minutes you pay for, it's the 20 years experience to know where to hit. Right. So it's not necessarily that you guys spend 6 hours on helping somebody buy a house or 20 hours and you get paid $15,000. It's the expertise and the work and all the knowledge and everything that you help them do. And so do not feel bad about going after your money or going after with the BBA is what I'm talking about when you're going after their money, because that's what you do. That's your expertise. And then on the actual contract, all you're doing is going to bat for them to get you paid. Because they owe you. They owe you, and we will go after it, and you will go after it if they don't pay you, right? So that's what they do. So don't feel bad about that. And I wasn't talking to you particularly, Christine. I'm just reminded of that.
Yeah.
Tell you guys that.
I love that story. I love that story, and it's very true. And so I told an investor that didn't want to like sign, had somebody, you know, and they were referred to me and they wanted to go look at properties. And I'm like, great, let's go look. And I'm like, hey, I have to send you XYZ. And she's like, oh, I'm an investor. I don't do that. And I'm like, well, you got to at least sign something that's property specific for what we're looking at. You know, I personally don't, I mean, I don't really intend to use the pre-touring. You know, I don't know. So I said, hey, you know, something has to be, you know, ratified. And she eventually agreed to that. But I just explained to her, like, you're paying for my experience and my expertise. You know, I'm not a door opener. But okay, but that's my original question. So is it a best practice to just always put my compensation in the body of the agreement?
Not
along
always.
with
Not
that
if you
rider?
not if you've already talked to them and they've already sent you the 3%.
Okay,
If they send you something less than 3% and your client doesn't want to
Got
pay,
it.
you explain it to your client that they're only paying me 2% and you owe me 3%. Would you like me to go after that in the contract? I told you when we first signed this that I would try to get you paid by the seller. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in the contract. Okay. Yes, that's okay. And then when
You
it
didn't
comes
want to
back,
ask for closing cost? You didn't want to ask for closing cost on the deal to cover that?
I said that I didn't want to. You know, we submitted the offer, and then we submitted what I did. I submit the offer, and then I submit the rider with the contingency upon my compensation. I already had a BBA with my buyer at 3%. They were offering 2.5%, so I negotiated for the 3%. They came back at 2.5%. So I didn't ask for the closing costs. No. Mm-mm.
all right. Tammy, did you have a different question? Okay, that was your question. Yeah, Christina, just go after it in the contract. If they're not paying you what you want, go after it in the contract. Any other questions on that or on anything? It's wide open now. Christina, you missed the thing about flood insurance. I'll go ahead and tell you that the flood rider, sorry, there's a flood disclosure. If they do not fill out a seller's property disclosure, that is a required form now that they fill out the flood one. Just in particular, it's part of the regular property disclosure at the bottom of the first page. But if they do not fill out a property disclosure, or they say that they never lived the property, so they don't fill out anything, they need to at least fill out that flood disclosure. It says they never made a claim to FEMA or anyone else, their insurance. All right. But you're back on top of the list. What's your question?
I just was curious how everybody is. I'm just interested to see how everybody is responding, because I did have an interesting situation. I had open house this weekend. I have a new listing in Sanford. It's beautiful. Please, somebody come bring me a buyer. 224 Brush Creek. And they called me and they're like, "Oh, we're interested. My husband and I are interested in this property. Can you tell me about it?" I'm like, "Sure, sure, sure." Asked her if she had an agent, and she said no, but that she had heard about the changes. And I go, "Great. You know, tell me what you've heard." And, you know, we had a discussion about it, and, you know, because she had heard several things, and, you know, I just had my usual discussion with her about it. And, you know, she said she wanted to look when I was going to be hosting the open house anyway. So I said, "Why don't you stop by?" And I just was curious in that case, she did stop by. She asked me to come early. I did come early, and she stopped by with an agent, so, which was fine, but I don't know why, you know, they should tell me she had an agent. But, I'm just curious how everybody's handling that conversation. You know, like if somebody's asking you, well, you know, what does this mean? And am I going to have to pay you? And I'll, you know, obviously I have what I say. I'm just curious if anybody's, you know, and if anybody is, most people seem to be okay with it. I sometimes get some, you know, like that investor where they were a little apprehensive. I'm just curious what everybody's thoughts are, how you're addressing it, the response that you're getting in general.
Should we just comment?
Yes, please.
I had a guy call, a Zillow lead call, and I told him, "Yeah, I'll be happy to show it to you. I'm going to send you a form. I just have to have a showing agreement signed, blah, blah. You're basically would be hiring me if you wanted to go forward with that house." And he's like, "I don't want to do that." And I'm like, he goes, "I just want to talk to the selling agent." I go, "Selling agents?" Well, I didn't really, that's why this came up. I didn't know the selling agent didn't have to sign an agreement. I go, "Well, any other agent's going to ask you to do the same thing." So anyway, he was like a $1.8 million lead. So he's like, "No, I don't want to, I know what I'm doing, blah, 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 blah." So like the next day I thought, that's a really big lead just to let go. I want to follow up. So I'm just telling you all this for a little tidbit. We have the Forewarn app. So I had his phone number from the Forewarn. And I thought, well, let me look him up because it's kind of a weird phone call. So I put his phone number in Forewarn, which gives you the address where he lives, criminal records, blah, blah, blah. So it gave me his address. So I put it into the property appraiser site, which he lived in Lake Nona, and he just had bought a house for $700,000 like 2 months ago. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe he just wants to just look to see, compare. I don't know. But anyway, I just thought I would throw that out there for everybody just to, if you're trying to research and track some things down, that did kind of give me some insight into that particular person.
Okay. Anybody else? Anybody else dealing with what Christina dealt with?
So on top of it all now, we have to be private investigators, not just
Correct.
transaction facilitators. Got it.
Yeah. Any other help for Christina? Christina, we'll talk about that later. Juan,
Just confirmation that if the buyer's agent has already agreed with the buyer to pay them, let's say 2.5%, and I was already offering 3% to anybody, I can just let him have the 3% and the buyer's agent doesn't pay him anything, or does he end up getting like 5.5?
the buyer's agent will probably go back to them and modify their agreement. That's what they should do. That's what I would do. They say they're offering 3% on this, so we're modifying their agreement.
So you don't have to pay anything to the buyer, basically.
Yes,
Okay.
they don't have to. I mean, you can, the buyer can sign an agreement, modification, or you can tell the seller that I can only take 2.5%. I don't think the buyer can walk with money from that.
No, not the buyer. I'm sorry. The agent is going to get 3% from me. Right?
Yeah. If they modify their agreement with their buyer, that's not your concern.
But that's on them.
That's on them. That's not your concern at all. You're offering 3%. They may come back and say I can only take 2.5%, or they may get a modification with their buyer. But that's the situation. Anne.
Yes, I just got back. I was out the country for a while. I just got back, and Aura called me to make a payment. So I don't know what's the best. Should I continue? What is the pro and con? Continue with Aura or go with you, Thompson, whatever? What is the option do I have? Pro and con.
That's a whole Thompson subject we did a training on, but it is so with the Thompson brokerage, your transaction fees go up, but you don't have to pay for the board. You get you just pay the MLS. You don't get any of the goodies that come with the board, which is you can't call yourself a realtor. You can call yourself a licensed real estate agent. They will probably not give you Super. They will, but not the other one. Super goes through the MLS now, but the other one, Century Lock, if you're with Aura, Century Lock will not. They'll cut you off because that's through the board, and that's about it. So it's up to you to decide. Your transaction fee goes up, but if you have your client pay your transaction fee anyway, that doesn't really matter. So there you are.
So most of you guys stay or change, or what would you guys do? I mean, I'm just curious.
I can tell you they wouldn't know, but I can tell you that most of them have stayed with the board.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Lori, I muted you because you were unmuted and had background noise, so you need to unmute again.
Okay, I'm back.
All right.
I just wanted to share something regarding the buyer who showed up with their agents. This goes back a couple of years, so this has nothing to do with the buyer broker agreement requirement today. But I had this buyer call me and ask to see a house. I got there and they mentioned their agent. I said, "Oh, really? I asked you if you were working with anybody." "Oh, I didn't know what you meant." "Okay, well, guess what? You're going to go back to your agent and have your agent make an appointment to see the house." And he said, "But we're right here." I said, "Yes, but I'm not doing your agent's job." And I made the agent make an appointment with me. I'm sorry, I was a bitch.
Okay. All right.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm in it 40 years. I'm not going to take crap from anybody.
Excellent work. Okay. So I think in this market, we've got a lot of agents who would just say, let's do it. But there are different markets and different times. But obviously they have to have your agent write the contract. If somebody wanders into an open house and you just let them look around and say, what they say they have an agent, say, great, have your agent write a contract. Victoria. Victoria, you might be on mute. You might have accidentally raised your hand. I'm not sure.
I know, I did raise my hand. Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted clarification with filling out the form because I want to make sure that I get the right compensation. So I wanted to see if you can show, let's just hypothetical, it's a 7% from the seller and 4% comes to the listing agent and 3% goes to the buyer's agent. Could you show how does that look like on the form agreement?
I can tell you without even looking. 8A will be 7 and then 10A will be 3.
Okay, I'm gonna write it down.
I'll show you. I'll pull it up.
Okay. That's like the last thing I want to get wrong.
Okay. Yes, you should not. That is, people are messing that up. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to bring it up today. That is one of the most messed up ones. Let me see here. Okay. Go down to the third page, go down to 8A is where you'll put 7. This is not the fillable one. I'm on a PDF one now. But 8A is where you'll put 7.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see my cursor there. And then 10A is where you'll put 3. So you're getting 7% total. Listing agent's getting 4, and the buyer's agent is getting 3. That is where that goes. So line 145, you'll check it and put 3 at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And line 109, you'll put 7.
That's 7% to the listing agent.
That's total 7%. And then that's 7% to
Right.
listing,
Okay, got it.
listing agent, but you're going to share 3% with anyone who brings a buyer. And if you find the buyer, you get all 7.
Okay, so there's not a section for the listing agent, 4%.
No,
You're just stating for
whatever.
the buyer.
That's the way it's always been, Victoria. The old form too. So it used to put 6 and then 3, or 5 and then 2.5, or 6 and then 2.5, or whatever you want. It doesn't have to be
Okay.
equal, as you're pointing out. But it's always been the total amount first, and then what you're offering the other side. This is where the seller allows you, approves you to offer something to the other side, to a helping agent.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Next is Pollock.
Hi, Ryan. So I would like to ask a question based off of something that a gentleman just mentioned, a hypothetical scenario. So if the buyers, as a buyer's agent, I have 2.5 sign on the BBA, and then the seller agrees to offer something, then I don't think you can double dip, because just above the compensation line in the buyer broker agreement, there is like a sentence that says anything that's paid by the seller would count towards the buyer's obligation. I mean, just for clarification.
He wasn't asking about double dipping. He was saying, I'm offering 3%, but their buyer brokerage agreement only says 2.5. What happens to that extra 0.5%? So I said the buyer's agent can either get this buyer to sign a modification that allows him to take 3%, him or her.
Oh, okay. I thought like the double tipping was like 2.5 plus 3 more.
No, there's no double dipping.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
that's not.
Thank you for clarification.
Yeah, you are limited to whatever is in that agreement. Dwayna?
Hey, Ryan. I still had a question about the flood disclosure.
Yes, ma'am.
So with wind damage or a wind claim, where is that disclosed? It's not on the flood because it wasn't related to flood, but it was my particular seller had a claim this would win. Is there a difference there, or?
There is a place on, no, it's a seller's property disclosure says, where is this? Should be on there. Seller's property disclosure has a place for that. Flood
Okay.
they just came up with their own form for flood just because of what we had go on. So the flood thing just came up.
Okay.
It is not, there's nothing for roofs. That's always been a thing, of course, but there's a whole roof section, wind section, all that stuff.
Okay.
On
All
the
right.
seller's property disclosure. That's where you would fill that out. It's on the seller's property disclosure. And if they don't, okay, so a wind event is not something that's definitely going to happen. A flood is likely to happen again because it's where your house is situated, where it's going to collect water. Wind is just bad luck. I mean,
Yeah.
on the top of a hill or something on top of a mountain with a lot of wind. But that's just a wind here is not something that is likely to reoccur. You don't think, oh, that house lost part of its roof during a hurricane, I better not buy that house, right?
Correct.
You just think
Correct.
as long as the roof's been fixed, then I got to take my chances.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Daryl is next. Candy, something happened to Candy, but Daryl's next.
I think he was asking if he had a buyer and he's got a BBA on the buyer for 3%. Okay, he's got the buyer paying 3%. Okay, he goes out and show a house and the seller is offering another 3%. Can the buyer's agent make the whole 6%? 3% from the buyer and 3% from the seller. I think what the question was.
Okay. No, of course not. No, the 3% takes the 3%. That just gets you paid. That's how it's supposed to work. That's how it always has worked, right? So even if you listen to your sales director for the last 10 years at FRI, he's been telling you to get a buyer broker agreement anyway before they made you do it. And that's the point, is that the seller back then you used to say seller's going to offer us something, so we can use that. Now you can't say that, of course, because it's not a fact anymore. It's usual, but it's not a fact. So no, you can't double dip. That's the same 3%. Malvis. Malvis, if you're talking, you're muted. All right, I'm going to go to Candy.
Okay, hi. I was just asking if you could just lightly pull up the buyer brokerage agreement since we're talking about it, just so we can kind of visually see some best practices. I know you weren't spending a lot of time on that, but just while we're talking about this, could you pull it up and maybe go over?
Yes, ma'am. Those who don't know, Candy's new with us. Candy, I have spent a lot of time on this. I love this form. I've been preaching this form before they made us use it. And so I am happy to share it with you.
Okay.
And you let me know what particular questions you have on it.
Nothing in particular, just to visually like pull it up while we're discussing certain things. Sometimes it's better to kind of visualize, as we're talking about certain subjects.
Of course. And I'm going to direct you to our, when you joined, I sent you a welcome to FRI email, and it's got our YouTube channel on it. I specifically did some on this back when it became a thing it didn't kick in until August, but we started in maybe June talking about it as soon as it came out.
Okay.
So I want you to see this. So we have made this our own form. It is on, you can find the FARBAR form on Transaction Desk or Form Simplicity, but our own form is on our paperless pipeline under the reference tab. So we have our name already put into it, and some of the things that we changed on it are on here. The parties, this is the buyer, this is us. The term you put, so buyer broker agreement is dates. It's not particular properties, it's dates. So you do it for 3 months or a month or a week or a day or whatever. You're just showing this weekend and that's all they'll pay you for, then you do that. The type of property, the location, that does not have to be, you're not bound by that. People change their minds all the time. If they signed a 3-month agreement with you, anybody who's worked real estate before knows that they said they wanted to buy a 3-2 in this zip code and they end up buying a 5-3 in another zip code or whatever, or the other way around. They think they're going to buy a nice 5-3 and they end up realizing they can only afford a 4-2 in a different part of town. So that is not necessarily whatever type of property. You can put single family home, location, Central Florida or wherever you are, South Florida, North Florida, wherever you are. Okay, consumers obligations, all this stuff. Retainer, you can put a retainer fee. It is non-refundable. They owe you right away. We will disperse it to you right away because it's non-refundable. It does not go toward the, so if they pay you $1,000 now, it doesn't come out of your commission later. It's just an addition to it. All right. So we'll go ahead and you'll have them pay Florida Realty Investments $1,000, and we will turn you around $900 because we take 10%. And then if we took 100 out of that, we'll take that off of your fee when you get paid. Purchase or exchange. This is what you're actually charging them. So typically it's going to be 3%, right? Unless you do a flat fee, but typically it's going to be 3%. Okay. If you want them to pay your transaction fee, actually you should do this one, or 3% plus whatever your transaction fee is. Okay. And if you do a lease with them, if they're doing this for a rental, you can do that as well. Protection period, I would go ahead and you can put 30 days, put 90 if you want. Conditional termination, this is the cancellation fee of this. Pay a cancellation fee. If you want to charge them $500 for wasting your time, you can do that. Dispute resolution, this is where we mark off the arbitration because you're going to be arguing with them. If you're arguing with them over $500, you do not want to have to hire an attorney and do all that stuff. If they do have to hire an attorney, and obviously you would be in the right here, they would have to pay your attorney fees in a real lawsuit. So that's not legal advice. That is just what we do. That is factual evidence of what we do. Okay, other terms. You can have them select this box. If that's what we were talking about earlier, if they cannot afford to pay this 3% and they don't want to buy properties unless the seller is offering it. Okay, you can do that. Otherwise, you're supposed to show them everything and go after the 3% in the contract, which you can do. But if you don't get it and they can't pay you, you're going to be out of luck. Okay, so you can have them check this. Now they're requesting to only be shown properties for which you're offered buyer brokerage compensation. Okay, because they don't want to come out of pocket to pay you, or they can't come out of pocket to pay you. Any questions, Candy, on that?
No, that's right on. Thank you.
And I've got trainings where I spend a lot more time and go over every line. If you would like to look at those, they're on YouTube. They're not bad. You can kind of filter through and see where I do it.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So you need either this or the showing agreement before you show properties. There's also a pre-touring agreement, but that means nothing. That's just that they absolutely will not sign anything else. That pre-touring agreement says there's a lot of, if they wish to work with me, they may do this, a bunch of non-legal jargon because it doesn't mean they owe you anything. All right. Malvis, did you get your hand situation or your?
Yeah, I found.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I think you kind of answered my question. So the retainer, regardless if it's for buyers or tenants, the retainer is totally separate from the compensation, meaning if you charge a renter or a buyer $100 as a retainer, that means that whoever the other party is listing the property, whether for rental or whether for sale, they can still compensate you even if you already charged a retainer to your customer?
Yeah. Look, this is what's changed. The one I've been preaching, the buyer brokerage agreement, the old one I've been preaching for 9.5 years until this one came up, is it was not it did go against. You could check a box to say whether it goes against or does not go against any compensation I received somewhere else. Now they have made it non-refundable, and it says right here on the next line, this retainer is in addition to any compensation earned by broker. Okay. Now, if you want to change that, if you want to say, all right, I'm going to rent something and I'm expecting a $500 payment, right? But I'm going to charge them $250 now, $250 here that they owe me right now just for wasting my next weekend. I got to drive them around everywhere, right? And I'm going to make $500 or whatever total. So they're going to owe me, let me get rid of this stuff because that's not in the right spot. But let's say they're going to pay me $500. Okay. If I want to make this $250 go against the $500, I can write it here still, even though it says it won't up there. Say if they rent a property within 30 days or 90 days or whatever, then the $250 will not be counted against, or the $250,000 will be deducted. The retainer will be deducted from the $500 total owed. Plus anything I receive from the seller will be deducted, right? Or the landlord will be deducted. Okay. You can do whatever you want with additional terms, as long as it's legal.
Yes.
And legal and ethical. That's the barrier.
Yes.
Then you can do what you want, whatever you agree to with your client. Okay.
Okay, but it's totally separate. You can.
It's
you can
totally,
keep
it's
both.
according to the words here, but that's what additional terms are for, right? That's what addendums are for. That's what additional terms are for, is if you want to go, again, add to or contradict. And
Mhm.
anytime every addendum says it overrides whatever's in the original agreement.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions on this? Those are great questions, by the way. Thank you all for your great questions today. Except for Christina. For the rest of you had really good questions. Any other questions, comments? All right, guys. Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate you. We will see you next week. We have a guest next week and pretty exciting stuff. Oh, wait, no, next week's the day before Thanksgiving. We will not have a guest the day before Thanksgiving. We will have an open forum, but we will not have a guest. I will host you guys. It will just be a very celebratory gathering for Thanksgiving, and any questions that you guys have, anything that comes up this week. So I will see you next week, guys. Thank you all for coming. Go get them.